Being a sales rep, I do a lot of driving on my own, and lots of times for reflections. And I often wonder what life experiences teach us and how they change us. Just from my perspective, as I said in one of my previous blogs, I was quite a sickly child, and our family was extremely poor. I would consider that we had a very poor upbringing. None of me or my siblings, I have 3 siblings, none of us had a bicycle growing up. I think they'll often share that I was the spoiled one because I was the youngest in the family and I was sickly. And yes, I probably was spoiled, but spoiled is a relative term. Spoiled in our family wasn't getting all the toys. It was probably growing up, there was 3 boys. Spoiled was probably me getting all the new clothes, not the hand-me-downs anymore, because at some stage in my life I outgrew my brothers, so their hand-me-downs just wouldn't fit. But I can remember for a while, before I had that growth explosion, I did use some of my brother's safari suits and some school uniforms and that type of thing. But anyway, be that as it may, maybe I was spoiled, but I don't consider myself as a spoiled child, simply because we come from an extremely poor family. I think we only had a vehicle in the family when I was about 11 or 12, and for a while, for most of my school life, I travelled to school by bus, either walked or by bus or train. And in those years, whilst my mother was still alive, we would generally travel by bus together, either from the Bluff, where we spent a portion of our lives, when we were in Durban city centre living in Akwini. I think we walked to school just to save the bus fare. Not too sure, maybe we caught a bus, and then we moved to Seaview, where me and my older brother, we trained it into school and back with my mom. But at the age of, when I was 16, my mom passed away. It's probably the most traumatic experience of my life. We found out, I thought it was 6 months prior, but it was actually about 18 months prior to her death, that she was extremely ill. And through sheer ignorance, she passed away in January 1978. It was a week or 2 before I started my final year of high school, my matric year. And that affected me. I mean, even to this day, 44 years later, if I think hard and I recollect that moment when my mother's grave went down into the soil, it's something that can bring tears to my eyes. And it affected me for a very, very long time thereafter. And I became extremely, I became extremely quiet and morose in my final year at school. I wasn't a happy person. And now I think to myself, what did that traumatic event teach me? And there was probably a lot of things, but for me, the message was, you've got to look after yourself. Because my mother died at the age of 47. She never smoked, and she had so little to drink. I would have considered her a teetotaler. But something must have happened in her body that caused cancer and resulted in such a quick death. And I can only think that it was her health. Her health wasn't what it should have been, and she never looked after herself. And the medical, that's why I've got a little bit of distrust in some of them, some doctors that have been part of my existence. For me it was quite amazing that a woman that was relatively healthy, was a little bit overweight, could just fall ill so quickly and pass away so quickly. And I question whether she was given the right advice when she did go and see a doctor, or was she just given tablets to sort out any ailments. I don't know. And for me, the message I'm getting out of that is, we were deprived of a mother for the major part of our lives growing up, and that really affected me, and I think it affected my siblings as well. And all that was if she had been a little bit healthier, her life could have been prolonged, and it could have been prolonged naturally without the help of science and medication, because science and medication didn't help her. She passed away. She was gone. And for me, that gives me the discipline to try and be as healthy as possible, to try and withstand the peer pressure one gets nowadays, to making sure you mix it up with all eating and drinking the wrong stuff when you do go out to parties. Because as you know, we live in a culture where if you don't drink, you can't have a good time. The start of having a good time and letting your hair down is got to have some alcohol. Now, I don't believe that. I believe you can have a good time, and I can really enjoy myself a lot more if I know the next morning I'm going to wake up in as good condition as I do normally. A healthy condition. So for me, health has become paramount. It's become paramount. So that's one little experience. Then I've got another one, and I don't know what this one is. Maybe it's being at the right place at the right time. When I finished school, I went to Newcastle, which is about 350, 400 kilometers away from my hometown of Durban, and I worked as a mechanical learner technician at what was then known as ISCOR, Iron and Steel Corporation, which has now become Mittal Steel in Newcastle. And whilst we were there as a learner mechanical technician, we were sent to college for theoretical education, and there was also an apprentice training school where you would go to the different you'd go to fitting, where you'd have to learn how to file and work with hand tools with steel. You'd go to the welding shop, you'd go to the electrical shop, pneumatic shop. Anyway, as a mechanical technician, I had to go through fitting. My first two courses there was fitting 1 and fitting 2. Now, fitting 1 was just learning how to use a file, how to use a hacksaw, chisel, and we spent a month doing little projects. Now, fitting 1 and fitting 2 were right next to each other, and in the center of the two shops was the office of the fitting 1 instructor and the fitting 2 instructor. So how it worked was you would get your projects for the month, and you'd have to take it into the office and show your fitting 1 instructor. I think his name was Peter Clayton. If your piece, and if he was satisfied with what you had done, he would pass your piece and you could move on to the next one. So I went through fitting 1, no problem. We did a month and we had quite a few projects to do. And every time I went into the office to see Mr. Clayton, obviously the fitting 2 instructor shared an office with him. So he was privy to all the conversations we had. And he was there, he was listening to everything. And unbeknown to me, the fitting 2 instructor, Mr. Bench, was taking an instant dislike to me because I was an Engelsman and he was Afrikaans. I smoked. At that stage I had curly hair. I know I'd done an afro, and I was generally a guy that I was like a rebel without a cause. I was respectful, but I also stood up for myself when I was with Mr. Clayton. And when Mr. Clayton was assessing my work, he would criticize in some cases, and I was asking questions and finding out what he wanted me to do. And I think Mr. Bench saw this as insubordination from an Englishman, and he took it a huge dislike to me. Anyway, I did my fitting 1, completed it, and I went into fitting 2. So from the first day that I was in fitting 2, there was a little bit more advanced work. We did some filing work, and for those in the trade, what fitting 2 was, we had to do a cube and a plate, and the cube had to be filed perfectly square, and the plate would have a square machined out of it using drills and files and all sorts of things, and the cube had to fit through the square of the plate perfectly, and everything had to be 100% square. And we all started at the same time, and every time I took my piece of work into Mr. Bench to have it assessed for me to be allowed to move on to the next step, he would grab a number punch, take my piece, put it on the marking table, which was this huge steel table, put the thing on there and knock the punch onto my piece of steel, say it's absolute crap, throw it in the bin, and told me to start again. And this situation occurred for like 2 weeks, and I had murderous thoughts about Mr. Bench. It was really working on my mind. I even went to see Mr. Olofse, who was the apprentice training school's principal, and I said to Mr. Olofse, I complained. I said, look, I don't know what the problem is, but Mr. Bench is really giving me a hard time, and I can't make progress in fitting 2, and I'm actually worried that I might throw a piece of steel at him because I'm so angry with the guy. I built up such a hatred for Mr. Bench, it was crazy. Anyway, this happened for about 2 weeks, and I was losing sleep over it because all my mates that had started at the same time, they were on about the 3rd or 4th project, and I was still battling to finish the first one. I couldn't get past first base, and it was frustrating me. And and I think even Mr. Clayton, the fitting 1 teacher who shared an office with Mr. Bench, was feeling sorry for me. But Mr. Bench would have none of it. I had become his focus of anger. I don't know what I obviously looked. He just didn't like me. Anyway, after about 2 weeks, I walked in to have my piece assessed again, knowing full well that the same thing was going to happen. And I overheard him saying to Mr. Clayton, he had a piece of paper in his hand, and I overheard him saying to Mr. Clayton, yeah, I just wish I could get somebody to translate this. So my ears perked up a little bit, and I said to him, I said, what is that? And he said to me, he said, no, it's some business proposal or something to do with his personal life, but the letter was in French. And I said, I can have that done for you. So he got all excited and he said, oh, can you? I said, yeah, but on one condition. So he said to me, well, what do you mean? I said, I'll have that done. I can have that done in 1 day for you. But I'm only going to do it on one condition. You sign my book to say that I've passed fitting 2. Otherwise, I'm not doing it. So what happened, obviously, he made a copy of this thing. And the next time I went down to Durban, I didn't have a car at the time, so I can't remember if it was the following weekend, but one of the weekends I went down and I asked my father to translate it, which he duly did. I think I had phoned him from the call box that particular day to ask him if he would be prepared to do something like that, and he said yes, no problem. So he did it. The following week I came in there and I had that piece, and I said, look, I'm going to give it to you, but only once you've signed off all my projects, even though I haven't done them. And Mr. Bench signed all my projects. I handed over the translated document. And from that day on, I became Mr. Bench's best mate. And it's amazing how, if I hadn't been in the office going to submit my piece of work for Mr. Bench to assess it, at that exact moment, what would have happened? What would have happened? For me, that was a case of being at the right place at the right time. And that sometimes happens to people, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you may be at the right place and you don't realize the importance of it, or you don't take advantage of being at the right place. For me, that was a sign that you have to understand every opportunity you get, and you've got to grab it with both hands. Because I could have just kept quiet as well. I could have seen the opportunity and just said, well, I hate this guy so much, he can go and suffer in silence. But you should never allow anger to rule your thoughts to a point where you don't see the opportunity when it comes up. Another one for me is I think we were pregnant with my first child, and I got the opportunity to go on the road. One of the companies offered me a job as a sales rep. It had happened 1 year previously, and I didn't take it because I felt, working for a large organization. I was working for Toyota at the time. Safe, secure environment. Why would I want to leave that for a job which offers or the part of remuneration is commission based, and fear sometimes gets in the way. Anyway, I didn't take it the first time I was offered the job, but the second time I did. And I am so thankful that I did take that job, because repping for me, I believe I was, and I think we all are, but I certainly believe that I was born to be a sales rep. I was born to interact with people and to try and add value, and to learn from other people as well, so that they could add value into my lives, into my life. I wasn't the type of guy that could work from 9 to 5 in four walls and work as just doing something in a confined space all the time. I needed stimulation. I needed difference. I needed to know that I was doing something different every day, and this job offers me that. It offers me the opportunity to add value and to meet people and to interact with people who also add value to my life. And I think if I hadn't taken that job and I had stayed at Toyota many years ago, 35 years ago, I would have turned out a completely different individual. Anyway, that's my thoughts and rants for the day. Have a good one.